Red and blue lights washed over our normally serene suburban street that Tuesday evening, casting long shadows over the trimmed hedges and pristine lawns of Willowbrook Estates. I stood motionless on my front porch, heart pounding as two police officers stepped out of their cruiser, hands resting lightly on their belts, surveying the scene. That's when I saw her, Karen Whitfield, the president of our HOA, standing at the edge of my driveway with her face flushed crimson, shouting frantically while pointing at my backyard. The officers exchanged puzzled looks as they approached, clearly unsure what to make of the situation. That's when the realization hit me. She had actually called 911 about my fence. Let me rewind. My name's Marcus Chen. Just 3 months ago, my wife Sarah, our toddler daughter Emma, and I moved into Willowbrook Estates. It seemed like a dream come true, tree-lined streets, tidy homes, and highly rated schools just minutes away. We'd spent the prior weekend putting up a simple 6-foot cedar privacy fence around our backyard. Nothing extravagant, just enough to keep Emma safe while she played. I had checked every rule, obtained permits, and ensured the fence was positioned exactly 18 inches inside the property line, just like the city required. I was proud of our work. 2 long days in the scorching August sun had left me exhausted but satisfied. That pride lasted until Monday morning, when I found a bright yellow slip under my windshield wiper. It bore the HOA's letterhead and a sharply angled scrawl warning that our fence violated the community's aesthetic harmony standards. We had 72 hours to remove it, or we'd start facing fines. The note was signed, unsurprisingly, by Karen Whitfield. Her visit came later that same day. Dressed in a crisp pantsuit despite the heat, she introduced herself with a polite but brittle smile. Her words were saccharine, her tone unmistakably patronizing. "I'm sure you didn't mean to disrupt the visual flow of our beautiful neighborhood," she cooed. When I explained that our fence was for Emma's safety, her smile froze. "Perhaps you should have considered that before moving to a community as exclusive as this one," she replied coldly. From that moment, things deteriorated. Each day brought a new note from Karen, referencing increasingly obscure HOA rules. She even cited something she called the Bird Migration Patterns Protection Clause, which sounded entirely fabricated. She went door to door warning neighbors that our fence would tank property values and attract what she vaguely described as undesirable elements. Most neighbors seemed uncomfortable with her campaign, offering us awkward smiles and muttered apologies when they passed by. Then came the vandalism. On Saturday morning, I found "Property Value Destroyer" spray-painted in thick black letters across our fence. The paint was fresh. Footprints in the mulch led away from the scene, and they matched the style of pointed heels Karen always wore. I called the police, but without hard evidence, there wasn't much they could do. Later that day, we received an official fine notice from the HOA, $50 per day until the fence came down. The violations listed didn't even exist when we moved in. They'd been added to the HOA website just days earlier. Still, I tried to handle it civilly. At the next HOA meeting, I brought all my documentation, permits, photos of similar fences in the neighborhood, everything. But Karen ran the meeting like a courtroom drama, cutting me off mid-sentence and declaring that those other fences had been grandfathered in. Her supporters nodded dutifully while others were silenced as out of order when they tried to defend me. Which brings us back to Tuesday evening. I had just finished rinsing shampoo from Emma's hair when I heard the sirens. Through the bathroom window, I saw the flashing lights outside our home. I rushed out, still damp, and found Karen gesturing wildly at my backyard, her voice shrill and cracked with fury. She was telling the officers that my fence posed a security threat. Criminals could hide behind it, she insisted. The wood treatment might be leaking chemicals into the soil. One of the officers, Rodriguez, according to his badge, glanced at the fence, then at Karen, then back again. He exhaled slowly and asked, "Ma'am, are you seriously telling me this requires a 911 response?" Karen's face turned a deeper shade of red. "As president of the Homeowners Association," she hissed, "I have a responsibility to protect this neighborhood from threats, even ones the untrained I might overlook." Rodriguez turned to me, clearly trying not to laugh. "Sir, is this your fence?" I nodded. Permitted, up to code, and identical to at least 3 others. He nodded back. Got it. He turned again to Karen. Ma'am, this is not an emergency. Please refrain from using emergency services for personal grievances. If you have a civil dispute, file it through the appropriate legal channels. Karen stood stunned, mouth slightly open, as the officers returned to their cruiser. I watched them pull away, the lights fading in the distance. For the first time since the ordeal began, I felt the weight begin to lift. Karen hadn't won, and my fence was staying right where it was. The flashing lights painted the quiet street in waves of red and blue as the police cruiser came to a stop. Officer Kim was already on her radio, likely checking if any real crimes had been linked to residential fence disputes. I approached the officers calmly, introducing myself and explaining that all my permits for the fence were in order. Officer Rodriguez asked to see them, and I retrieved the documents from my filing cabinet without hesitation. As he reviewed the paperwork, Karen, the HOA president, grew visibly agitated. She insisted that city permits didn't override the authority of the HOA. Officer Kim asked her directly if she had any proof that the fence violated local laws or posed a safety risk. Karen sputtered about property values and neighborhood standards but failed to produce anything concrete. The officers exchanged a glance that said this wasn't their first time dealing with such complaints. Rodriguez returned the documents and turned to Karen. His voice was calm but firm as he explained that abusing emergency services was a serious offense. He reminded her that 911 was for genuine emergencies, not personal disputes over legal home improvements. He warned that if she continued to file false reports, she could face fines and even criminal charges. Karen's jaw worked silently, unable to form a response beyond a weak claim that she was just protecting the neighborhood. Kim recommended she familiarize herself with what qualified as an emergency before calling again. As the officers turned to leave, several neighbors had gathered to watch from their front lawns. I overheard Tom from 2 doors down whispering to his wife that Karen had finally gone too far. Across the street, Maria Garcia was already on the phone, mentioning something about calling an emergency HOA meeting. The cruiser pulled away, leaving Karen alone in my driveway. Her face burned with a mix of rage and embarrassment. Pointing a trembling finger at me, she hissed, "This isn't over," before storming back home. That night I'd had enough. I spent hours digging through HOA bylaws and legal codes. What I uncovered was staggering. Many of the rules Karen had cited were never properly approved by the board. The fine she tried to slap on me far exceeded legal limits without a formal hearing. Worse, I found that she had used HOA funds to consult a lawyer on how to force me to take down the fence. A blatant misuse of community money. I documented everything, built a thorough presentation, and reached out to other residents. To my surprise, many had similar stories of being bullied by Karen's arbitrary rule enforcement. Mike Thompson told me he'd been fined $300 for leaving his garbage cans out for 10 minutes after collection. The Johnsons were forced to tear out their vegetable garden over unfounded complaints of vermin. Even Mrs. Patterson, who'd lived here for decades, was harassed about her door color, a blue she'd had since the 90s. The neighborhood was ready to push back. We organized an emergency HOA meeting that Thursday. Word spread quickly, and by the time it started, the community center was packed. Karen sat at the board's head, trying to maintain her usual composure, but her eyes betrayed her nervousness. She attempted to control the meeting's flow, but David Liu, a board member who had stayed silent under her reign, finally spoke up. He motioned to add the fence issue and Karen's behavior to the agenda. The motion was seconded, and the board voted in favor, despite her protests. I presented everything clearly and calmly. The original bylaws versus the unauthorized versions Karen enforced, the permit approvals, and an inspector's report verifying my fence's compliance. I even played footage from Tom's security camera, showing Karen near the fence the night it was vandalized. The image wasn't conclusive enough to prove guilt, but it raised eyebrows. Most damning were the financial records showing her use of HOA funds to pay legal fees tied to personal vendettas and the 911 call that neighbors had caught on video. The crowd erupted, Neighbor after neighbor stood to recount their own stories. Maria Garcia said she'd been fined for having too many flowers. A young couple revealed Karen had literally measured their grass with a ruler to fine them for exceeding height limits. Even longtime board member Robert Sterling admitted that he had been too intimidated to challenge her. What was meant to be a short meeting turned into a 3-hour reckoning. David Liu eventually called for a vote of no confidence. Every hand but Karen's went up. Her ally Betty Morrison faltered and eventually changed her vote when she saw the tide had fully turned. Next came a vote on my fence. Unanimously approved. The board reversed all the fines Karen had imposed on me and agreed to investigate her other penalties from the past year for possible refunds. Karen's expression twisted with each decision. Her grip on the gavel tightened with white-knuckled tension. The final blow came from Jennifer Walsh, a city attorney Maria had contacted after the police incident. She announced that Karen was under investigation for abuse of emergency services and that she could be criminally charged. Misuse of HOA funds and falsified records might lead to civil penalties as well. Just the emergency call alone carried a possible $5,000 fine and 6 months of jail time. Silence overtook the room. Karen stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the tile. Her face was ghostly pale. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked around the room for support and found none. With her shoulders drooping, she left the room in stunned silence. 3 days later, a court summons arrived. She was fined $3,000 for misusing emergency services and sentenced to 100 hours of community service. The HOA board voted her out permanently, and she faced a civil lawsuit totaling over $15,000 in misappropriated funds. The last time I saw her, she was packing boxes into a moving van.